Good evening. Welcome to my random evening podcast session. Yes, it's dark and everything because, well, I'm sitting in a car and waiting for my kids to be done with their activities. So I thought I would get on and it would grace you all with a random evening podcast. So here we go. This is something that's been on my mind for a few days, and I figured I'd let it all out, and here you go. So I don't know if you've ever seen the movie that's called The Breakup. I'm sure most people are familiar with it, but if you haven't, it's all about how this couple gets together, they're in love, and all about how that slowly their marriage and everything or whatever deteriorates and they end up breaking up in the end. And that's how it ends. So I actually do a little spoof on it um, that's already on one of my podcasts. It's already on my channel. You can search through and find it. I don't remember what I titled it. Anyway, I basically critique the section where they start to break up, and I sit there and I'm focusing on the woman and like, here's what she could have done better, or here's what she, all that stuff. But anyway, we're not doing that here. If you're not familiar with the movie or the scene that I'm talking about, I recommend going find it and listening to it, or maybe a trailer of the movie. I don't know, whatever. You don't have to do any of that, but I wanted to address something here. So in that movie, there's something really important to note. She wasn't a bad person, and neither was he. Neither person was a bad person. They were both good people who just had poor understanding of each other's needs and poor communication. That's all it was. And I think with most marriages and relationships that fall apart, that's all it is. There are two major things going on. One, you don't feel like your needs are being met. And two, because communication is poor, because you don't know how to communicate to each other. And speaking to that person who's crying out right now, yeah, but what if you're trying to communicate and they keep shutting you down or they get defensive? There you go. Again, poor communication. Maybe you don't know how to articulate what you want. Maybe you haven't quite decided what you want, or you don't know how to say what you want, right? And maybe they don't understand what you're saying and how you're saying it and how that even, you know, relates to them, or and they just get defensive, right? Because they don't understand, all they hear is criticism when you're just trying to help them understand your feelings and where you're coming from, especially as being a woman, right? And it's too easy for all of us to be like, oh, well, why do I bother trying? Because obviously I'm not good enough. Because when we come to each other with feelings or feeling like our needs aren't being met, we will every time make that person feel like they're not enough. So what's the solution? How are we able to communicate our needs and not make the other person feel like crap, right? That's the this is what people need to figure out so that things don't fall apart so easily. So the trick is to this is, if even just one person in the relationship understands that the other person doesn't get it and thinks, goes, this is my new term I just came up actually today, is back to basics. I didn't have a term for it before. I've been doing this my entire marriage, but this is what has saved me in every situation. If there's been a meltdown, whatever, a meltdown in my marriage or whatever, or anything like that, then these are my basics. I go back to basics, and this is the basics. I ground myself with these two things. I love him, and he's a good person. So whatever is going on, whatever misunderstanding is happening, whatever was triggered, whatever defensiveness comes up, I say to myself, I love him and he's a good person. That reminds me that we love each other and he loves me and we're okay. It's just having a moment. He's having a moment, or maybe I'm having the moment and he doesn't get it. And I can't fault him for what he just doesn't understand. It is, it is, this is the best relation I can, this is the best relative thing I can compare it to. When you're speaking to a toddler and you're teaching them how to, let's say, mop the floor, okay? So, or even do dishes, right? So you're teaching them chores. They're doing the dishes. Let's say they're doing the dishes, and you're like, okay, let me teach you how to do the dishes. So we have to wash them and we have to rinse them, right? And then we need to dry them and put them away. So there's all these steps to do, and you got to teach this toddler these steps. But you're tired, and it takes a lot to teach a toddler. So you're like, well, I'm just gonna, you know, that you're assuming that they might get what you're saying. So you're like, okay, so you're like, okay, so we wash the dishes, and then rinse the dishes, and then we dry them, we put them away, right? And it's like, okay, now rinse them. And then maybe later, they didn't remember everything you said. And maybe they washed the dishes, but then you're like, hey, you didn't rinse them. And then they're like, what's rinsing? Oh, they don't even understand what rinsing is. So rinsing is when you wash the soap off. You take water and you spray all the soap off, right? So you have to break it down for them. There was this cute little movie that this is probably a better story to even use. There's this cute little movie I watched years ago when I was on my mission, and it was about this mother. She goes running out because her child is about to step off the curb, off the sidewalk, and he's about to go into oncoming traffic, this little toddler, because he's a curious little boy. And she goes out there and she is just, the mother is like frantic and angry and of course scared out of her mind because she's like, I'm gonna lose this kid. And she's shaking her kid and she's like, I told you not to get go I told you not to go to the curb. I told you not to go to the curb. And then and she was like, "Oh my gosh," she never took the time to explain to him what a curb was. So she kept saying, "Don't go to the curb," but he didn't know what that meant. So within our relationships, we have to have a lot of grace for each other because there's so much that we don't understand what each other means, especially when we're different genders and we come from different backgrounds and we've had different experiences. We each have our own language. I can't tell you how many times my husband has said something to me, thought that he spoke incredibly clearly, and I understood and moved on. And I was left going, I don't get it. And I can't tell you how many times I've spoken something which I thought was incredibly clear and made perfect sense, but he took it completely a different way. And I was like, oh, shoot, no, I did not mean it that way at all. I'm like, so at first I'd be like, oh, I can't believe you took it that way. I don't understand what I did. But then experience and time and patience with myself and with my spouse, I learned. I was like, okay, he doesn't understand things when I say it this way. He takes it wrong. Because of his background and because of how things were said to him when he was a child or when, from his siblings, his parents, friends, whatever, right? And we all have these experiences, right? Same here. And so because of how I worded it and in the order I worded it, it spoke to him very differently. So I learned I needed to switch the order of things on how I said them. For instance, let me see if I can give you an example. Let's see. Um, so if I were to say, this is hard to give an example right on the fly here. If I were to say something like, the tree, the tree was in the park and it had brown all over it, right? Maybe he would take that as like, well, okay, why was the tree in the park or what? I don't know. But and the point of the story that I want to point out is that it had brown on it. But because I mentioned that the tree was in the park, he's so focused on that part. He's like, I know this is a really dumb example, okay? Just ride with me here. He's just like, but why was the tree in the park? And what do you mean by the tree was in the park? Shouldn't the tree been in, the uh, what's another place? Trees. Shouldn't the tree be in the forest? I know there's trees in parks too, but okay, just bear with me. Shouldn't the tree be in the forest? Like, why is the tree in the park? And I'm like, oh, so he's missing the point of like, there's brown on the tree. And I'm like, okay. So what I should have done, and what I learned to do is like rearrange how I said things. The main point needs to come out first, especially if you have a spouse like me. I'm a little ADD, and my husband's a little ADD. So we lose track of what you're saying, and we're very good at like picking out that one thing, and we're like, that's all the point of the story. And anyone who relates to this, feel free to laugh because come on, it's funny. All right. I know at the time it's probably not, but so I learned to rearrange my wording. So I saw a tree and it had brown on it. Do you see how I didn't even say the park yet? Right? I mean, that's part of it. It's an important part of my story, but what I need him to focus on is this part. So I make sure that I cut out all the excess for a minute here and focus on that. And he's like, oh, really? Why did it have brown on it? And then we can focus on the brown parts, which I wanted to get to. Right. And then I say, well, this and this. And then I can like, well, it was in the park and blah, 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 blah. You see how I've set it off with the right tone of where I actually wanted that conversation to go. And then I was able to back up and add in those details, if that makes sense, right? So um, I've learned that prefacing is important. So like with children, whenever my children did something and I'm like, okay, I need to use the dad card here, but I don't want him to react this way. I need him to react this way because I set myself up this way for the kid and because I need a certain outcome. So I'll preface like, okay, I have I have a complaint or a story to tell you about a kid, but I need you to not do this. I need you to do this because blah, blah, blah. Then he knows, okay, this is what she needs from me. I want to be supportive because we are a team. And then I'll tell him the story and then he will react accordingly. However, if he feels he's just like, no, 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 we need to do this because that was unacceptable or something like that, then that's when I'm like, okay, if you feel so, that's fine. I just so you know, blah, 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 right? So you see how the communication, you preface, you set it up, you're able to do these things and that really really helps but if you just come out and just be like blah 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 and by the way it's it just can be a mess and they can take it wrong so it was a time when I here's a good life example there was a time when my husband he's like so good at dad packing he's like phenomenal and dad packing means that he can pack take a ton of stuff and pack it in a tight corner super efficiently and everything will fit perfectly so he packed and he always does a great job and then he's just like this isn't and then I compliment him like well you pack things really well it's like well this isn't packed that well and I'm like and then what I meant was is I was like what I said was it's just like well then you were lazy at this this was your lazy part but what I meant was like wow you're such good at packing I already thought that the sloppy work was so good then that means you're incredibly good if your sloppy work is this good. That's what I meant. But because of how I said it, he took it as that I was saying, well, you certainly did a sloppy job this time. And I was like, oh, shoot. No, 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 no. I'm like, I'm sorry, where did that wrong? And he was like, a little hurt. Because obviously I would be too if it was reversed, right? And he's done, and it's so easy. But anyway, I backed up and I'm like, well, no, what I meant was, is you're so good at it. Even your sloppy work is incredible work or whatever. But then anyway, he'd also stated that like, the kids helped out with this. So that's why it's not as tight and as neat as it could be. I already thought it was a great job. Cause like we were putting groceries in the bag. I'm like, oh, there's plenty. Of course there's plenty. And he's just like, oh yeah, we have all the stuff in the back. How are we going to fit this? I'm like, well, it's because how you pack. You pack so well that everything fits. And then we open it up, and he's just like, "Yeah, well, it's not as packed as good as it could be," and that's what stimulated me to say, "Well, excuse me, you'll have to bear with me. I've got a little bit of a something going on in my throat. It's that tickly throat that pops up. Get some water here. We're not afraid to show that we're human on this podcast." Okay, so anyway, so that's what stimulated me to say, "Wow, even your sloppy work is amazing," or whatever like that. That's how amazing you are. But because of how I worded it in my way, it was not taken that way. So Do you see like how easy it is for two really good people that just have maybe even traumatic backgrounds and different views of things can make each other, you know, look bad or feel bad or assume that the other person isn't that great a person, or heaven forbid you get a friend who's like validating all of your, you know, all of your feelings about like how, you know, let's say that like, yeah, they're not paying attention to me and they're doing nothing. Well, you need to leave him because he ain't worth it. You need to find that man, you know. Excuse me. You need to find that man who actually pays attention to you, who actually cares about you because he's not worth you're better than this. You're better than him. You can, you know what I mean? What I'm saying? Like, ew, toxic. No. Okay. Unless you're actually in a relationship where the person is actually physically beating you up or literally manipulating you and literally, you know, like people could be gaslighting and not meaning to, or they're generally a good person. They don't realize they're doing it. You know what I mean? And they're coming from a background where they're just trying to protect themselves. That's not something right. But if you are being, you know, like seriously verbally abused all the time in a certain way, because it's really easy for people to like, oh yeah, I'm verbally abused, but then are you? Or are you just misunderstanding what they're saying? And I'm not, and only you can really decide that, okay? Only you can make those kind of decisions, right? But I've been in a relationship where I was being manipulated, where it was not a safe place. He was not a safe person. He was not okay in the head, and it was not okay. And I'm going to actually do a podcast all about this. And my own dear sister was in a relationship that was absolutely horrible. She basically married a borderline cult leader. If you know anything about cult leaders and their certain personality things, yeah, okay. So when she's ready for it, we're gonna get on and we're gonna do a whole podcast on that. So that's coming. Look for that. But we're talking here about people who are just generally good people. And I keep saying this. I know you keep hearing me say this. Like people are generally good people. We just have different ways of communicating and different ways of like it's just different. And so this is why go back to basics when you have these moments, okay? I love him and he's a good person. Or we love each other. I love him, he loves me, and we're both good people. We just don't understand each other right now. And that's okay. That's normal and it's human. And this can be worked out, right? There's no reason to throw in the towel. Okay. So I did a podcast recently that's called Marriage, Meltdowns in Marriage, or Marriages and Meltdowns, or something like that. So go listen to that because this will help with this as well. Okay. So go listen to that. All right. My time is ending and I need to end this for now, but I hope this helps anybody. Okay. Remember the basics. Go back to basics when things get rough. I love him. I know he loves me, even though it's hard to feel right now. And they, he's a good person and I'm a good person. Okay. Nobody's trying to be evil or horrible or neglective or anything. They just don't know that they are. And they don't know how to hear you when you say it. Even when you're saying it straight. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, yeah, but I've said it exactly how I feel, exactly what I want, and they're still not fulfilling it. You'd be surprised how much they just don't understand, especially when they're already feeling critical. All they hear is the criticism. They don't hear the how you're suffering. They hear, oh, I'm not enough for you. I'm just not enough. Okay. So go back to basics, dig deep, and things will get better. I promise. Gratitude. Remember, gratitude. We're on this challenge right now for this whole month of October. Get on the challenge. And if it's past October and you're listening to this later and you want to be on this challenge, please, 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 like if you want the workbook and you want some help, please reach out to me, message me, put something in the comments, go to bsua.com, message me, personally message me and say, hey, I want that workbook. I need help. I do, just so you know, every week I offer a free session, a free 25 or 30-minute session with me with one person. So it's a first come, first serve basis. So jump on there, get a free session, and let me see how I can help you. All right. I wish you all an amazing evening, an amazing marriage. Remember to be grateful for what you already have, and more will start pouring into you. Be grateful for the time you get now and the love you get now, and more will come to you. This is true. I promise you, this works. And the only time this doesn't work is when you don't believe it's going to work. And when the other person is legitimately not invested in your marriage. There's a difference between being not invested and tapping out. I have known couples where the other partner has just tapped out because they're like, I'm not enough, so why do I bother trying anymore? And maybe this resonates with you and you're the one that's like, why do I'm tapping out. I don't even know why I bother. I'm because I'm not enough. It doesn't seem like whatever I do is ever enough. But it's just not true. You are always enough. You even need to believe that they're enough. And as you start believing that, and you don't need your partner's participation in any of this for any of this to work, you just believe, you just start doing, even if you don't believe that it's going to work, you start doing it, practicing it, and start filling your head with gratitude. And the change comes so wonderfully. Like it takes time. You can't just do it for a day and maybe it works and you got instant results and you're like, whoa, this does work. Yay. But then the next day you go back to being, focusing on the negative. It's like, oh, I'm still so frustrated with this. Why can't this change? And he's never going to change. Why does he have to change? Why does anybody have to change necessarily? I mean, we all want to grow together, but we shouldn't expect and put this you need to change or I'm out of here, right? So let's be grateful for everything we have, for the time that's already given to us, for the love that's already been given. When the words I love you are said to you, absorb that into your heart. Say, thank you. I love you too. And I love the way you love me. I love it when you say it to me. I love it when you show it to me. Whenever you know, randomly do the dishes. I love that. I love like whatever. If your accessories when you buy me flowers. I love it. It makes me feel like I'm so special. Thank you for loving me that way, right? Gratitude is magical. So let's get to it. Okay. Please reach out. You need support. You need help. I'm here. I've got you. Come on. Let's do this. You got this. And rock on.